Welcome to a new edition. If you're in the United States, I hope you're having an awesome holiday. And I'm here today with two subject matters in mind. First of all, this morning's new moon, 7:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, that was the Cancer new moon, and that was conjunct Venus and Mercury. Quite a beautiful new moon, and a lot of other distinguishing features, which I'll get into in half a moment. And in addition, I'd like to take a look at the United States Sibly Chart, the what you might think of as horoscope number one for the United States of America. This is the most commonly used chart for the Declaration of Independence. The United States has other charts, but this is one that is, in my experience, tried and true. And there's another one coming up in November, which we can talk about then. That's called Scorpionic America. But the Sibley chart is the July 4th chart most of us use. So I'll have both of those subjects for you. First of all, there was a new moon this morning in the sign Cancer. And what was so interesting about that was, first of all, the presence of Venus and Mercury in the sign Cancer. And in addition, this is the first new moon after Mars stationed direct last Wednesday evening. So we are now in a new environment. Mars is direct. It's no longer retrograde. The Mars retrograde lasted for 2.5 months. The process, as I mentioned last time, takes a little while to work out. It'll be working itself out well into August, but there is that immediate sense of things are different and perhaps even a bit better with Mars stationing direct. My intent was to take you, my viewers, listeners, and readers, through the process of Mars retrograde as consciously as possible. And I think that collectively we did a pretty good job of that, judging from the level of discussion, places like Facebook and on the Planet Waves homepage, and the quality of the discussion bouncing around behind the scenes among the Planet Waves editors. I think that we collectively did a good job of getting a handle on what this thing was about. What it was about was, I believe, penetrating through belief and going into a layer of actual visceral experience. Belief symbolized by Mars retrograde in Sagittarius, where this began, and the penetrating quality suggested by the retrograde, the going in deeper. And when you follow Sagittarius in, when you penetrate through all those levels of belief and maybe take them back one layer at a time, or clarify things, or perhaps even just internalize belief and account for what you believe and how you got to believe it and what it means and what some of the other possibilities are, you emerge on an inner plane where, in a sense, belief ceases to be relevant and ceases to be necessary, where all that really is necessary is your direct inner experience of your kind of inner environment. So this is the new phase is Mars direct, and this will probably make it a little bit easier for you to direct your intention, to direct your willpower. You may have learned a lot of kind of tools or lessons in the process of Mars retrograde, and I trust you've come out of that particular process having some better enhanced idea of what it is that you want from yourself, that you want from life, and that you have to offer, because Mars is also about what you have to offer. Let's take a look at that new moon chart here on the new heavy-duty thing. Now, actually, I decided, instead of casting the new moon chart for this, let's use a chart close to the new moon chart, and that is the chart for the moon conjunct Venus, to first of all emphasize the point that the moon and Venus and all that are conjunct. Here's how that looks. The moon here, Venus here, the sun here, and Mercury here. Let's move the microphone, make sure everybody can hear me. Okay, so there's this grouping of planets in the sign Cancer, and the new moon happened right about at 13 degrees and change of the sign Cancer. Mercury very close by. Venus 7 degrees away, but close enough to fully be in the aspect pattern. Here's Mars, which stationed direct about 5 days ago. It's still in the degree where it's stationed. And if you'll notice that all of these points have a lower number than slower moving Mars. That means there's going to be a series of trines to Mars over the course of the next week. That would generally be interpreted by almost any astrologer as a positive development and something useful. But I have my cautionary note about that and the way you might make it more let's say, productive for you. Part of what makes this whole pattern interesting is, in addition to all these planets trine Mars, there's a whole bunch going on in Pisces. Pisces being the mother of all water signs, and you can see here that there is Nessus, Neptune, the south node, Chiron, and there's another point called Borsisi in Pisces, and all of these planets focus Pisces in different ways, and they work with the, let's say, the subtle, the realm of subtle feelings and the realm of subtle perception. Pisces is almost always more about the background than it is about the figure. You might think of Pisces as being the primordial soup in which we are all swimming, the primordial water of the ocean. Water is kind of a sacrament of Pisces, and with all these planets in Pisces, though, it ceases to be so much a part of the background, or at least it remains part of the background, and the planets, one by one, bring different qualities of Pisces to the foreground. So there's a bunch of those here. You can see that there's Neptune, which you might say is adding a lot of Pisces to Pisces. There is Nessus, which is a kind of encouraging a level of accountability about what you feel. There's the South Node, which is a kind of a purge, a kind of a cleansing of the waters of Pisces. And there's Chiron, which is about focusing the subtle realm into something that's specific and useful, and perhaps a bit more obvious than Pisces would ordinarily be. A little more light on the subject there. Okay, so speaking of bringing things in Pisces out of the background. All right, so but this chart is small, and I've redrawn this chart in my hand-drawn style to make it easier to see what's going on. I didn't use the words grand trine yet, but there is a grand trine in the water signs. The grand trine in the water signs has, first of all, a point of origin, you might say, over here in the sign Cancer. There's Mercury, Sun, Venus, and the Moon, and then there is Mars direct in Scorpio, and then there are all these planets in Pisces. And so what's happening is all these planets in the water signs are resonating with one another. They are acting on one another, they're resonating on one another, and they're creating a kind of a sensation of flow between and among all of the water signs. Now, typically, trines are supposed to be good, and grand trines, therefore, are supposed to be very good. A grand trine meaning, by the way, when all of the signs in one particular element are covered, in this case, water. So there's all the water signs are covered. But the thing with the water signs, the thing with the grand trine is that it tends to create a kind of a vortex effect, a kind of a Bermuda Triangle effect, where once things start going a certain way, they're going to persist in going that way until there is some intervention. And with the water signs, this can be, particularly challenging because emotions are one of the most difficult, speaking of water, difficult things to control for us humans. And one interesting thing about astrology is that it provides one of the few portals from the mental realm into the intuitive emotional realm. So this is what we're doing here when we do astrology, is we're kind of connecting the mental realm to the intuitive and the emotional realm. And first of all, the thing is we can see this grand trine. And so the grand trine is encouraging you to emphasize, and by the way, the trine is here. We're going to get into what this shape is in about 10 seconds. Encouraging you to build what's working, invest your energy in what is working, and gradually divest your energy from what is not working. So this is a a kind of a tool that astrology offers. However, this is not simply a grand trine pattern. This is a kite pattern, and you can tell it's a kite pattern because it's shaped like a kite. And the thing that makes it a kite pattern is something that's fortunately powerful and influential, which is Pluto up here in Capricorn, which is adding emphasis of the water. Let's pull this in as close as possible. Have the cameraman move in. As close as possible. And new thought. It's emphasizing the earth signs. So we have all of these three feminine water signs emphasized, which can create this vortex effect. To get out of that, in case you find yourself going in the wrong direction, the thing to emphasize is Pluto. Pluto is like this thing you can kind of attach yourself to, or a process you can work on that will take you out of the vortex of the water signs temporarily enough to see and feel what's going on, and to recognize that there is, as indicated by Pluto in Capricorn, a kind of a structural level, kind of like the sea floor, but beneath the oceans, or perhaps even what you might think of as dry land, and to work with changes on the earthly level. So it's not that easy to change things on the emotional level. You can sort of sail those waters, you can swim in those waters, you can ride the currents, and you can follow the tides, but you can't really change the ocean that much except for extremely gradually. So when you are involved in an ocean-like watery situation, and you want to make some changes, the implication here is to kind of get off the carousel by emphasizing Pluto and Capricorn. Pluto and Capricorn asks the question: what are the structural changes that you're making in your life? How are you relating to the structural changes in society? What is your relationship to the past? What is your Pluto? I agree with the evolutionary astrology school, is an evolutionary indicator. It's a kind of an unstoppable force of the soul's movement. What is the relationship of that unstoppable force to the often persistent patterns of the past? Water signs can accumulate a lot of the past, so too can Capricorn. When we add a factor like Pluto in Capricorn, this is an indication of working consciously with the past, going through that attic that is Capricorn, and making sure that you found the treasures, and that you've put back what kind of given back to the universe what doesn't belong to you and what you don't want to inherit. Okay, so this is a picture of this, and the moon conjunct Venus happens tonight, and over the course of the week, the sun will oppose Pluto. That happens in a few days. Let's just get that. I meant to calculate that. Let's get that up on the radar here. You can't see what I'm doing, but I will tell you in a second. Sun opposite. There should be a way to display this for you. Pluto. Sun opposes Pluto on the 7th. So today is the 4th. 4, 5, 6, 7. That should be Thursday at 6:26 p.m. Eastern Time. And so what we have going on through the course of the week is this gradual building of the Sun-Pluto opposition. The thing with the Sun-Pluto opposition is to be mindful of power struggles, and part of being mindful of power struggles is monitoring carefully the way you or anyone else has any interest at all in having power over anything or anyone except for maybe your own life. And all the water signs are reminding you that there's only so far you can go having power over your own life. Really, what you mostly get is influence, and you get the ability to make some changes. So be mindful of that, and I would strongly suggest sidestepping power struggles in favor of compromise, but not let go of the opportunity that let's say the confrontation affords, but to shift the confrontation from one of kind of headbanging or the kind of manipulation that Pluto might be about, or the obsessive quality that Pluto might be about, to an emphasis on cooperation. That can be done. Really pretty simple, straightforward move. Okay, so there's a picture of the new moon today. I'd like to take a few minutes and visually introduce the subject of the United States Sibly Chart. I'm planning on recording Planet Waves FM tomorrow, Tuesday, so I'll have more to say about this chart in Tuesday's Planet Waves FM. However, we have the visual medium here, and I'd like to at least show you this. I'll refer listeners back from Planet Waves FM. So first of all, we're looking at the USA Sibly chart. It's chart 1 for the United States as designated in the Lois Rodden collection. There's a bunch of charts for July 4th. There really is no actual information available about the time that the declaration was completed or signing was begun, how many days it took. Apparently it took more than one day, but there was an astrologer present who noted the time in his ephemeris. It's kind of secondhand. Sibley is the guy who, anyway, I don't have the whole story of the Sibley chart handy. Hold on a second here. My desk has come to life. All of a sudden, this is my music stand with all of the future projects on it. Okay, so anyway, it's the Sibley chart, and the thing about charts is that regardless of their origin, the proof of a chart is in the tasting of it. The proof is in the working of the chart, and for a lot of reasons, this chart works really well, and it was extraordinarily active around 9/11. If you recall, when Saturn was in Gemini and Pluto was in Sagittarius, and the Saturn-Pluto opposition happened along the central axis, the ascendant axis of this chart, and then we ended up with this massive turning point in United States history. Some astrologers did predict this in various shades, but that I know of, none predicted the complete watershed shift in American history. So there was a warning of a war with Afghanistan. Rob Hand predicted that. Another astrologer specifically predicted terrorist activity in her kind of throwaway daily calendar for that day. But no one said that this is a before and after moment in the history of the United States. And it's kind of obvious that it was one. Okay, so anyway, there's a couple of really interesting things about the United States chart. First of all, look at all this emphasis on the sign Cancer. There's Venus, Jupiter, the Sun, Mercury, the vertex, and the part of fortune, all collected in the sign Cancer and in the 8th house. I'm counting the 8th house beginning approximately where Venus begins, using whole sign houses, and Cancer goes through the 8th place. That's the 8th house there, 8th place, 8th house, same thing. And this is an inheritance. When you think of the American original settlers who came here, who showed up on this vast continent that we ultimately stole from people who were happy here, it anyway represents a kind of an inheritance from them and from what the founders called divine providence, and as such a huge amount of potential, right? So when you see this in a person's chart, if you see this in a personal natal chart, that being that again, you know that there's something special going on with this being, and you know that there is that they have a lot of resources available, and these resources came from other people, and they often came from dead people. That's what's going on in the 8th house, is that the resources of dead people are coming to us, and so that's basically what happened. And then the next question is, what do you do with those resources? What do we do? What have we done with those resources? Have we treated them respectfully? Have we made the most of them? Have we done the most we can possibly do with this American experiment? But in addition to representing the resources of dead people, the 8th house is about the shared resource known as sexuality. And so while it may seem interesting that death and sex come in the same place, this is perfectly intuitive, and it's been established by various forms of genetics and immunology and the French word for orgasm, which is little death. And so there's numerous associations that go back to antiquity between sex and death. And in a sense, the sex part has its origins in the marital resource of reproduction. But then when you get into the other factors of sex, like surrender and letting go, you move into the pleasure realm, you move into the exploratory realm, and basically that this grouping, which some would call a stellium, but really because the sun is in it, it's not actually a stellium. It's a grouping. It's a grouping of planets around the sun, closely following the sun. I mean, the Declaration of Independence was, in its own way, an inspired piece of writing, and it was people founding a home. I mean, the sign Cancer is about home, and so we had inherited or stolen this beautiful home, and the question is, what way were we going to take care of that home? What we're going to do with this place? What we're going to do with this homestead? And what seems to have happened is that people in the United States, which was founded by Puritans, the first people who showed up here were, if you don't count various Viking expeditions, were Puritans, the Plymouth Rock, and that influenced us. Then many colonists and settlers came, anticipating the end of the world, and so the nation itself had been colonized by people who were Puritans mainly, and then by businessmen. So there's another image of the eighth house, rather than by people seeking liberation of some kind. And yet our founding documents are all about outlining liberties. And of course, there's numerous contradictions in that. The famous 3/5 compromise, where African American slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person for the purpose of establishing the population of a place, even though they could not vote, and in many places cannot vote today for various reasons. In any event, we have this powerful eighth house, and the country seems to have become obsessed with squandering its resources and with death, rather than with pleasure and in any way emotional surrender. So it's basically this beautiful potential of the eighth house seems to have been frozen in an obsession with death and with money. And there has been, except for scant few periods in American history, a war waged on sexuality, where basically sexuality in any form could be considered in some way a kind of a criminal act. And we live in a culture where it seems as if, to many people's perception, sex always has to have a victim. And I think that until we, first of all, start using our resources wisely and start treating our home like home, and then treat sexuality like the inherently organic, necessary thing that it is. Did I say beautiful? We're going to have a lot of problems. And one thing that's been going on is, if you notice all those planets in the sign Cancer, well, down here in Capricorn, there has been a planet coming through. That's to say Pluto, which provokes all kinds of changes. Once Pluto got done working the ascendant and the seventh house, the Pluto-Saturn opposition across the seventh and the first, Pluto moved on, and then it began making oppositions to all of these points. And so it's made an opposition so far to Venus, to Jupiter. It made the opposition to the Sun a couple of years ago. It's working up to an opposition with Mercury. And at the same time, Uranus and Eris have been working their way through Aries, making squares to all these things, resulting in instability. That's the basic thing that we live with right now, is this ongoing sense of instability. And by the way, if just backtracking one thought, you want some concept of what sex really means in the American psyche, well, the United States of America in its chart has one of the sauciest, naughtiest, most frisky, fun things anybody could possibly want in a chart, which is a fifth house Chiron. Fifth house Chiron, especially in Aries, is about seeking one's identity through sexuality. It's also about the need for actual experience rather than to have things happening in theory. And, it's certainly possible to do it all up in theory, but the fifth house wants creative experience. It wants an experiment. It wants to experiment in one's existence. And it is sad to say that we do most of that experimentation in the United States through violence. And that is you might say that is the most shadowy side of Chiron in Aries in the fifth house, as you take this whole potentially gorgeous creative experiment, this whole experiment in feeling and sharing and relating, and you turn it into this kind of egotistical, dark, aggressive force. This is not necessary to do this, but the only way out is to embrace the beauty of existence, the beauty of sharing, the beauty of relating, the joy of community. So there's a lot of ways to look at that Cancer on the 8th. That's here, and one of them is to share our resources. I mean, this is like a picture of the mythical Thanksgiving, which probably never happened. The one where all the Indians got together and the settlers got together, and they had this big meal where everybody kind of hung out and shared their stuff, like the old story stone soup. Well, that's one way that we could work in the United States. We could live that way in the United States. And for all this kind of one for all for one bullshit that we have in politics, the fact is that everyone in the United States who made their fortune did so by utilizing some version of the collective commons. And there's a lot of collective commons to be had, whether we're talking about all that stuff in the sign Cancer here, in case you still are not remembering. It is seemingly limitless resources from sea to shining sea. Anyone who succeeds in the United States is tapping into those resources. You're not synthesizing your own metal ore. You're maybe synthesizing your ideas, but then you need to make them out of something, and so and have people to help you make them. And so the collective factor is huge, and I think that this chart is a blazing invitation for us in the United States to be more generous and charitable toward one another and to be less selfish. However, when people become death obsessed, they tend to become greedy, and when they take their creative sexual impulse and suppress it, that will then morph into an aggressive violent impulse, including, as mentioned several times, the conflation of aggression and sexuality, which is extremely toxic and which we have not really begun to grapple with yet at all. We need to separate these impulses out and to really be able to see them distinctly from one another, and to appreciate the inherently life-giving nature of the sharing of sexuality and the life-taking, aggressive nature of killing each other, which is what seems to be the popular thing, and it seems to be the thing that you can see it on like any one of 10 television stations 24 hours a day. And what is this obsession? Well, this is the United States chart gone bad. It's completely fucked up use of one of the most beautiful charts that anyone could ever want to have. A couple of other bits going on here. I'm 28 minutes into this thing. If you're still watching, then you're probably interested in what I'm saying. The moon is ruled, Cancer is ruled by the moon. We find the moon down here in the very mental third house with lots of Aquarius going on. It's conjunct Pallas Athene. There's an obsession with authority. There's an obsession here with daddy pleasing. We also see, by the way, and the moon is void, of course. The moon is the latest degree planet in the chart, with the exception of a semi-square to Pluto, which to me is just kind of conflating a sense of fear of change with whatever this moon in Aquarius represents. By the way, the United States is in its Pluto return. Pluto has a 250-year orbit, and we are approaching the 250th anniversary of the United States. That's coming up rather soon. I think I didn't calculate the date of that, but let's get that. While I'm sitting here talking about it on this beautiful afternoon, let's go to events. By the way, I use a program called IO Edition. This is actually IO Sprite. Position when Pluto is going to be in Capricorn at 27:33. 27 tab 33. And the United States Pluto return is going to be on February 20th, 2022. Okay, that's coming up kind of soon. But the thing is that when you're talking about a planet like Pluto, the entire duration of Pluto in Capricorn, all of this is, in fact, the Pluto return of the country, since things that happen once every 250 years do not happen often. Okay, so that means to me that the United States has lots of catching up on its evolutionary growth to do. Basically, in short, collectively and individually, we have to stop being such a bunch of ignorant dumbasses and actually work with each other and work together and set some community goals and basically stop being so greedy and pissed off all the time and recognize the incredible abundance that we have, even in a time when things are getting a little shaky. We still live in a world of abundance, and on this continent we have so much in the way of resources, and yet so much is in peril. One last thing, and I'm going to get into this more as I develop my coverage of the presidential election. Let's say the highest placement in this chart, even though Neptune appears to be a little bit higher, Saturn here in Libra gets a lot of points. We have the midheaven, first of all, very close to the first degree of Libra. That qualifies as the Aries point. We are an influential country. Second, Saturn is in Libra. Saturn is exalted in Libra. Saturn rules Aquarius and Capricorn, but it's exalted in Libra. And here it is looming high above this chart, notably squaring the sun, which is also calling for discipline. But the thing with squaring the sun and many of these other points, especially the sun, but up here in the 10th house, the Saturn is cautioning us to get away from this authority complex that we have in the United States, where basically we invest almost all of our political energy into some form of daddy worship. We do a lot of rallying around the flagpole, which is really a metaphor for rallying around the penis, and the whole discussion of politics, for the most part, is all about which personality is going to get elected president. I can't believe how horrendous this has become. I mean, I watch a fair amount of cable news, and all you can hear on cable news is discussion of these candidates. And it's seemingly evenly split now between Hillary and Trump. But that's really what we think is going to give us kind of a civic consciousness. And so I think that as long as we pretend that civic consciousness is about this president thing all the time, the big boss, who the big boss is, that we're going to be completely lost people politically. And we need to enlighten ourselves about the political process. And the political process, first of all, besides being extremely neurotic, is about how we use resources and how we run society. And right now, most people have completely abdicated any even vague interest in how society is actually run, and have turned the whole thing into a kind of a cartoon of worshiping Big Daddy. And we need to get over our personal daddy issues there. All right, so I'll have more to say about this on Planet Waves FM. That'll be on Tuesday, the 5th. In addition, I'll take a look at what's going on with the Juno Jupiter orbiter that has just arrived. And, well, I'm sure I'll think of a few more things to say. Thanks for your subscriptions to Planet Waves. That is to say, the actual business of Planet Waves. We do this. I do this. I come to work every day because you guys take part in our business, and I sell these really beautiful readings that are unbelievably affordable. I also do personal consulting, which is slightly less affordable. We sell subscriptions and we offer a lot. So if you're curious about astrology, click over to planetwaves.net, go click through to our main page, and you can take part in the conversation. Anyone can take part in the conversation. There's quite a few bright people hanging around Planet Waves with things to say. We'd love to see you over there. All right. Happy Independence Day. Signing off for now. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino. Good to be with you.